Leute, ich bin Ezekiel. Heute ist ein sehr schöner Tag hier auf Brasilien und ihr seht Deutsch für euch. Danke.
Today we're talking about articles. Now, if you're an old school follower of the channel, you might think, but Katja, you talked about articles years ago. And I did. So if you need a refresher on der, die, das, and ein, and generally about the genders and how to know when to use which one, go click on the little I to check that one out. Although, spoiler alert, not even my grammar skills are powerful enough to crack that case. But that is not going to be our topic today, so while yes, we're talking about articles again, that's not going to be the exact thing. Instead, I am dusting off my Grundkurs series, meaning covering basics, to explain the Nullartikel to you. The article that isn't one, because it's zero. A zero article. Why will you need this? Well, you will need it in order not to say things like Ich bin ein Berliner or Ich habe immer das Pech or even da ist die Katja. Alright, I hope that got you excited enough because we're going to continue in just a few minutes. Before that, it's sponsor time! Today's episode, as so often, is sponsored by my friends over at Lingoda. Which means that, especially in these times, you can study from the comfort of your own home, which they have plenty of experience in because they have been doing this way since before 2020. Now, the biggest cool thing about this for especially busy people is that no matter what your schedule is, you will always find an available class with a teacher that works for your schedule because they have classes available 24/7. They focus big on fluency, so you get learning materials that you can use before and after classes. You have the live interactions with teachers, or if you take part in one of their limited size group classes, also with other learners, which is intended to focus on getting you to speak fluently with native speakers ASAP. What's new this month is that Lingoda has a new look, which is always nice. I could learn a thing or two from that because they want to stay relevant and modern for their online students. In line with that, they have also added new features to their learning materials, such as quizzes that you can take at your own pace and time, as well as homework, which always sounds daunting, but just means there's extra materials to work through between classes if you need it and want it. And that's basically all you need to know to get started. If you want to do so, you can take their 1-week trial first, during which time you can take 3 free classes. That's always a joy to say, 3 free classes. And if you then decide to sign up, be sure to use my code to get 20% off, so a 20% discount on your first month. This applies to month-to-month packages as well as the marathon, but not to the sprint, but you will find all that out when you visit the page. The link is in the description. So again, use my code BLOSSOM21 to join Lingoda today and get a 20% discount on your first payment. And that's it. Now let's get back to Nullartikel. A quick refresher first. The definite articles, so der, die, and das, are basically, not 100% of the time, but basically used the same way or in places where you would use the or the in English, which means most often. As a general rule, the indefinite articles, so ein, are used in circumstances where the noun that you are using them with is first introduced, so for the first time, into the story that you're telling, into the thing that you are talking about. While after that, once that thing has been introduced, you usually use the definite article. So for example, ich sehe ein Kind. Now I know that the child exists, so I switch to definite. Das Kind, the one that I just talked about, das Kind spielt mit einem Spielzeug. It plays with a toy, some toy. I am now going to define the toy more if I want to do that. So now if I talk about the toy, I don't say a toy anymore, I say the toy, just like in English. You get where I'm going with this. So first time you introduce something, it's used with an indefinite article, and then it becomes a definite article. Of course, this isn't the only scenario, but this is the general rule that covers a lot, if not most cases. Now, the interesting thing about indefinite articles is that when we have an underdefined or undefined plural, there is no plural indefinite article, meaning that this is the first case in which we use a Nullartikel, a zero article. Because if we have a plural that is undefined, there just isn't an article. By the way, linguistically, this is an interesting instance of a so-called zero morpheme, which exists in a lot of languages, English among them. For example, in this case, this exists in English too. If I say, da steht ein Pferd, there's a horse standing there, and I then make it plural, both in German and in English, the article disappears. Da stehen Pferde. There are horses standing there. So, when to use the Nullartikel? We're covering the biggest aspect first, that is, abstract ideas and concepts, or generalized ideas. What do I mean by that? So first of all, to get a small grammar note out of the way, when this happens, the noun that is used stands in the Akkusativ. We will also often find verb phrases that are made up of a verb and a noun, such as in this example. Ich möchte Auto fahren. I want to drive a car, or I want to go driving in a car. This works like spazieren gehen, so to go on a walk. Ich möchte spazieren gehen, ich möchte Auto fahren. Compare this to a sentence that actually uses an article, such as ich möchte das Auto fahren, ich möchte dieses Auto fahren, which means I want to drive this car, I want to drive the car. So there is a car that both you and supposedly your listener know you are talking about in this case. Ich möchte Auto fahren, no article. I want to go driving, I want to drive in general. And ich möchte das Auto fahren are different because ich möchte das Auto fahren refers to a specific car. When we don't have a verb-noun combination like that, we can find these nouns without articles after prepositions, like in this case. Hat das ohne Hilfe gemacht. He did that without help. Now, it should come as no surprise or shock that this is used especially often with nouns that express concepts or things that are kind of abstract or hard to define and grasp to begin with. And they're used especially often in combination with haben, to have. I tried to break this down into a few categories. First of all, we have feelings, such as Angst haben, to be afraid. Ich habe Angst. Same with hunger. Wir haben Hunger. Or thirst. Wir haben Durst. We're thirsty. We're hungry. Then we have character traits in the wider sense, such as sie hat Mut. She is courageous. She has courage. Dafür braucht man Kraft. You need to be strong. You need to have strength for that. Dafür braucht man Kraft. And then lastly, something I couldn't call anything else but concepts, such as honor or dignity or music. Alles mit Würde. Du musst Vertrauen haben. You have to have some trust. Sie hört Musik. She listens to music, or she's hearing music. Again, here I could also say sie hört die Musik, but then we would be talking about a specific instance of music that the listener is already aware of. So for example, we know there's a concert going on in some hall, and then we talk about somebody who walks by. There we could say, sie kommt vorbei, and she hears the music, und sie hört die Musik. Generally though, if we're just listening to music, like in English, sie hört Musik. Glück and Pech, luck and bad luck. Glück haben, Pech haben. Ich habe Glück gehabt. Ich habe Glück. Ich habe immer Pech. No article. This one was definitely the hardest to nail down though, so that's why I started off with it. So now we can move on to easier ones. So number 2, uncountables. Nouns that cannot be put into discrete units. Trinkt Kaffee. He drinks coffee. So fluids and drinks. It's the same for water, milk, blood, whatever. Oil. Is that a fluid? I guess it's a fluid. Oil. Ich liebe Gold. Or meine Kette ist aus Silber. So metals or other raw stone or mining products for this sense. So coal would also be among this. Da fehlt Salz. This is missing salt. So any sort of seasoning or spice. Meine Tasche ist aus Leder. My bag is made of leather. So again, raw crafting materials and types of fabric also fall in this category. Money, but only the non-specific kind, of course, currency. So euro, dollars, whatever, they are countable. So they're not part of this. But Geld, just money as itself, falls in this as well. There's also some other things, such as air. Non-specific food items like bread or vegetables or meat, and sand. And there's probably a few others. I think glass is probably also part of it, since we're talking about sand. And there's definitely more on this list, but you should be able to get an idea of this based on uncountables in English. The same goes for number 3, measurements or measured things. Ein Glas Bier bitte. I'd like a glass of beer, please. Das sind 3 Kilo Mehl. That's 3 kilograms of flour. Wir haben Kartoffeln geerntet. We dug out some potatoes. In this case, this is kind of in between uncountables and measurements because, of course, you can count distinct potatoes, but in this example, I didn't use a measurement. So, I don't know, you pick whichever category this makes more sense to you. Number 4, continents, countries, and cities. Kommt aus Australien. He's from Australia. Südafrika ist in Afrika. South Africa is in Africa. Ich lebe in Deutschland. I live in Germany. Warst du schon in Amsterdam? Have you been to Amsterdam? Now, there is a list of countries that, despite this rule, always do come with an article attached because German just can't live without its dear exceptions. I'm not going to list these countries verbally. You can read the list if you pause the video, but this is them. Also, this is not true for regions such as der Balkan, the Balkans, or der Westen, the West, if you're using that word to describe a region, but is still true for regional parts of a country that are described using still the name of the country in there, such as Norddeutschland, Südfrankreich, or Westafrika, or Mittelamerika, all that kind of stuff. There you still wouldn't use an article. Lebt in Südfrankreich. He lives in southern France. Ich komme aus Norddeutschland. I'm from northern Germany, etc. Number 5, people categories. Now, obviously, there's a few that fall into this, but they're all grouped into people categories. We also use a Nullartikel. By the way, I keep wanting to say Nullartikel because I'm speaking English to you, but important note, it's pronounced Nullartikel. Nullartikel. So we use that with a lot of information about people when there is no bigger defining context around it. What does that mean? This relates to professions and related states, so some sort of status, I guess, nationalities, titles, and actually names. Most of this is also true in English, but German and English clash on this when talking about professions, so watch out for that one. So, bigger defining context, what does that mean? Well, so let's start with professions. We don't use an article when we talk about somebody's profession by just using sein, so to be, or werden, so to become. Mein Nachbar ist Arzt. Not like in English, with an undefined article. No article. Mein Nachbar ist Arzt. My neighbor is a doctor. When I'm just defining a person as a profession, I don't use an article. Wir sind gestern Eltern geworden. We became parents yesterday. Wir sind gestern Eltern geworden. Meine Tochter will Astronaut werden. My daughter wants to be an astronaut. Sie sind jetzt Besitzer eines neuen Autos. You are now the owner, literally owner, of a new car. This is also true when we use a noun after als in the phrase arbeiten als, so to work as. For example, ich arbeite als Lehrerin. I work as a teacher. Ich arbeite als Lehrerin. Und wie ist das so als Vater? So what's it like as a father? Und wie ist das so als Vater? Next one, titles. Same stuff, so we're just gonna get to the examples. Hallo, Frau Schmidt. Obviously, when addressing someone, this should be evident to most people, but I'm including it anyway. Hallo, Frau Schmidt. No article. Ruf Mama an. Call mom. Same as in English. Ruf Mama an. Kennst du Professor Lehmann? Do you know Professor Lehmann? This doesn't mean, of course, that when using professor or professor as a normal noun in a sentence, there, of course, you still use an article, right? That doesn't mean that professor is always exempt from articles. It just means that when you use it as the title of a specific person, then you don't use an article. But of course, if I say the professor is in her study, I would also use an article in German. So, die Professorin ist in ihrem Arbeitszimmer. Next up, nationalities. Again, same thing after sein or werden. though that's probably rare, but after sein or werden, and after the non-temporal als. By the way, if you want to learn about the different kinds of als, watch this video. Not going to get into that now. But after non-temporal als. Ich bin Deutsche. I'm German. I'm a German with a female ending. Ich bin Berliner. I'm a Berliner. I'm from Berlin. Now this is the famous Kennedy quote, and why usually people say it means I'm a donut. It doesn't, but the correct way to use it would be Ich bin Berliner without an article. Was sagst du dazu als Russe? Naja, als Amerikaner würde ich sagen, and then lastly, names. Now this one is interesting because in many regions of Germany, you will actually hear people using definite articles in combination with first names all the time. So while formally in standard German, using a definite article or any article, but using an article with a first name is incorrect or even impolite, it's not true everywhere in Germany. So in standard German, if you were talking about me, you could say Katja mag Bären. Katja likes bears. In many dialects, it's perfectly normal and in fact more common to say, die Katja hat viele Mützen. The Katja has many beanies or hats, floppy hats, whatever you want to call it. Now for me personally, I kind of had an interesting experience with this because I grew up around peers that used articles before names all the time because I grew up in one of those regions, while at home, we never used articles. I was raised with the conscience that using an article with somebody's name or when pointing out somebody is rude. You're supposed to use the name and only the name and never definitely just an article, but also not an article in front of the name. Now, this is also the standard German image, that it's rude to use articles, but again, in some dialects, it might sound off to people that you don't use one. So as long as you're not learning German while living in Germany right now, I'd say just go with a standard version. If you're in Germany, it might be smartest to adjust to whatever you hear people say around you, just to fit in. If you want to be standard German, you don't use articles with names, but it varies. And that's it for today. Whew, this got long, but I think I now covered everything about the Nullartikel. If you want to see the script for this episode and all my other grammar episodes, which contain extra examples and explanations and color coding and all the good stuff, you can consider becoming one of my patrons, which is also what all of these lovely people on this list are. These are people who are supporting DFA financially and get rewards for it on this page that is linked on the screen right now and also always in the description. You can head over there and see what rewards you get besides being on the list and getting grammar scripts, because it has a few more. So go check it out. Go consider it. Thank you very much if you do. And thank you even more to everybody who's already doing it, especially those of you who are pledging $10 and up just because. Or no, actually, that's a lie. It's no longer just because. Well, it's never been just because. You're also on the list. But as of recently, you get these episodes without any ads in them if you are a $10 and up supporter on Patreon. So if that's something you would like, that's also a point to consider. But that's just a PS. Now, your random word of the week is das Sieb. Or also the ones with the bigger holes are often called Nudelsieb. Noodle sieve. Noodle. Well, we don't call it a colander, that's for sure. Could also be made into a hat. If your head isn't as big as mine. Anyway, bis dann. Tschüss. Au.